so politicising military design thinking. This is a couple of slides I just threw together today after BB went and put it on LinkedIn, and I thought, my gosh, we might have millions of people turning up, and I was a bit worried. So just very quickly in context, for those not familiar, obviously you know where Australia is, and you know we've got kangaroos and koala. But to put it in context, 26 million people is not a lot, and big geography, not as big as Canada ratio, I guess, but we're not very big, I guess is my key point. And we only have one college, one academy, which serves the entire Defence Force. So I guess for Canada, it's probably similar, but for some of the other countries, it might not be, I don't know. And training is very much a single service responsibility. So just running through the questions which were posed by Thomas, just looking at the who. So who are our thought leaders? Some of you will recognise these names. The two historic names, I guess you could call them, Anne-Marie Gasolino and Alex Ryan. Alex is now, I think, based in Canada, but both of them are kind of doing the world circuit, and we don't really see either of them too much now anymore. But they were from our DSTG, which was, or DSTO as it was then, which is our boffins, our computer scientists and so forth. So these two were both experts in complex adaptive systems and came from a more of a mathematical term. And they started the conversation going about a decade or so ago. Jacko, or Aaron Jackson, some of you will be aware of, he's published a fair bit. He, as per the photo, is a uniformed member at times, but he's reservist. He also is a scientist type boffin person as a civilian working in DSTO, although he's taken leave from that to help with South Australia's COVID response planning. So he's getting really good hands-on practical experience in design thinking and looking at complex systems, which is great. Which is why he's not here tonight, because he's flat out doing all that. Cara Wrigley is the person who was supposed to be joining us tonight, but obviously hasn't quite made it yet. She is our kind of lead authority in Australia, but comes from a civilian academic background in terms of, has come through the design space, but has become very involved with defence and has had a number of lead roles. So she's been involved particularly with Air Force in their 5th Gen Air Force project, which was to bring on board the Joint Strike Fighter F-35s. And so she's been engaged with defence for about the last 5-10 years, working heavily, primarily with Air Force, but in more recent times now, primarily with Army. She's picked up a massive contract there where she's doing a lot of work with their brand new baby officer cadets who are going through the initial officer training and starting to teach design thinking there, and also heavily involved with Navy. So she's now closed the trifecta of Army, Navy and Air Force. And she also has a team of people. I've only put 3 photos here, but if you've looked at any of her publications that are co-authored, you'll see there's a whole bunch of names that she's working with. So just from left to right on those photos, Genevieve Mosley is a PhD candidate who's working on looking at how defence teach design thinking. So she's tracking around the country, going to any workshops and everything and studying how we are delivering it, which is obviously great for us because we're getting a whole bunch of useful data. Unfortunately, COVID, of course, has impacted on that, and some of her project work has been stalled because they didn't happen in person, and then she had to reapply for ethics, yada, yada. The next photo in the middle is Dr. Carla Straker. She is one of Cara's right-hand sort of lieutenants in terms of driving a whole bunch of project work, but also a lecturer at the University of Queensland. And then yours truly, who is studying and looking at a whole bunch of stuff, obviously with a background in educational theory, but more interested now in design thinking and how we teach that. All right, so on to the students. There are a whole bunch of people that we are delivering packages to throughout Australia. I have to say, and I'll get onto it in a sec, it's largely ad hoc, but there's a whole bunch of people. And so, without going into all of these, but there's various drop-in centres. I'm sure these resonate with other countries. We've got various project teams delivering specific packages for different projects, and so they will search and support, be it from external consultants or within defence. We have expertise where we'll go and help out these. We do stuff like adaptive red teaming, which is a term I'm sure some of you are familiar with. School of Special Operations is perhaps one of the biggest and most consistent. They have been doing design thinking for the longest and in a more consistent way. A little bit of a speed bump at the moment, but I have been going and teaching the design thinking packages at School of Special Operations, along with one of the outsiders who's supposed to have joined us by now, but hasn't by the looks of it. But Staff College, we've been dabbling. War College, we've been dabbling. RMCD is Royal Military College Duntroon, so that is where they teach the officer cadets, as I alluded to. They've just embarked on a big project. In fact, Kara's arriving in Canberra tomorrow to discuss this, and it's about to go live in the next week or two. And then within joint professional military education, so particularly things like Staff College and War College, we're just changing contractors for the university, and we're looking at bringing back an elective which will specialise in design thinking. So we've previously had it about 5-10 years ago. We're looking at bringing it back again. So it's a kind of on again, off again thing. It's not quite steady state. Right, so I've listed multi-paradigmatic approach under the what. So what are we teaching? Arguably, this is more of a question of what layers are we doing? So symbolically showing a bunch of post-it notes if we were to brainstorm. And then, of course, through affinitizing, we would look for thematic analysis. And there's kind of 3 levels. One is the obvious awareness raising, where we're just going out and delivering briefs. And we're getting an invite to do sort of a 1-period lesson or presentation through to half-day type things. That's what I list as largely awareness raising, but you'll see also thrown in there things like blogs, journal articles, senior officer engagements. We've got a number of 2-stars who are interested now, so having a lot of meetings with them and getting a little bit of momentum with them getting on board. Small inroads into doctrine, but it's problematic, and obviously various briefs. At the sort of practical workshop level, acculturation is where we're deliberately kind of exposing people to in workshop. Sometimes this is actually teaching design thinking before we get into it. It might be a workshop on design thinking, but other times it's actually just a project to look at how to increase women in the Navy, for example. We just go in and use design thinking without overstating we are. We just step them through, and before they realise it, they're actually using it. So that's kind of where I'm going with the practical workshops. Defence by Design is actually a really cool little package, and you can see the photo there. This is actually our 1-star course, so the War College course. These students are using Defence by Design. So this is a package which is very similar to a lot of other packages that exist out there, but this is one that Kara Wrigley's designed herself, and it uses Australian language, Australian examples, Australian metaphors, and so it resonates with the audience, and we are getting really good buy-in. So it's a boxed card set where they get stepped through and they're challenged with questions that they have to answer. At the deeper level, obviously this is where we'd all like to go, and things such as a learning lab or some of those elective modules, sponsoring students to do PhDs, that kind of stuff. So there's a whole bunch of really cool things going on there. So this is just the framework that you can see there, which Kara's come up with. This is actually version 1. She's just developing version 2 at the moment, but it's not released, so I can't. I haven't seen it myself, so I can't use it. But the other thing just popping up there is Aaron Jackson's recent publication, which is a multi-volume chapter publication, which has got a number of authors contributing, and it's part of our effort to promote design thinking and getting the conversation started. Hope I'm not close to my 8 minutes there, Thomas. I'm going as fast as I can. So our strategy. What is our strategy? We shouldn't really have a strategy, I guess, because in the principles of design thinking, it's more fluid, but we don't actually have one. We're using Akerloff's sort of dissolution rather than expecting a perfect solution. As I say, acculturation, so it's more subtle and indirect. We're not deliberately trying to force it upon people. We find that we get resistance, particularly from those traditionalists who don't like alternative thinking. They love their traditional planning. So a bunch of good stuff there, but we're tracking in terms of trying to influence it in a subtle way. So we're using design thinking on design thinking implementation. Ultimately, we're treating it as a wicked problem because we are part of the solution. As soon as we apply something, we change the system. And so therefore, every time we implement something, it's altering the system, and we're just gradually nudging it along. Final slide, strategic end state. Where are we heading and why? What is it we're trying to achieve? This is a little bit esoteric, but happy to take questions and answers a little bit later. But ultimately, we're looking at education and experience, and you can throw training in under the education for want of a better term. But the two go hand in hand, of course. So what we're delivering is a kind of a cycle of professional military education linked in with the heuristic development of experience. This is all cool. I think most people understand that concept. But key to all of this is the glue that takes us to the next level. And I've thrown in the word cognitive agility, but there's a whole bunch of words that different people use out there. But I think you get the general gist of how do we develop the intelligence to join the dots? How do we do the knowledge creation? How do we make sense of and take this to the next level? Instead of walking backwards into the future, instead of worrying about the last wars we fought, how are we looking forward and creating stuff that has never been thought of or seen before? So cognitive agility links both education and experience, and it's a two-way thing, but cognitive agility is fundamental, and together these grow to make what we're labeling as professional wisdom. And professional wisdom is at the individual level. So how do we grow professional wisdom in our people? And ultimately that leads to what we refer to as the intellectual edge, is our collective organizational level higher standard of thinking. So we ultimately want to outsmart our adversary. And the adversary doesn't necessarily have to be an enemy in a kinetic conflict. It can be something like COVID or whatever, and trying to understand and get a grasp of that. So the collective professional wisdom is what we refer to as the intellectual edge. And that is ultimately where we're striving for. There's more publications on all that, but I don't have time to go into it, which is probably a good thing because I'd be here all night. But happy to take questions. Or if we're doing questions at the end, I don't know how we're doing this. But
I think we will open up and have some reflections after all four presentations.